And this presentation is the official culmination of the celebration, the 60th anniversary celebration of the Georgia Genealogical Society. So what I wanted to do today was to have you hear from some members who have varying lengths of time with membership with regards to the Georgia Genealogical Society. And so we thought it best that they each introduce themselves with a brief bio, because we got questions. So who has the mic?
I do.
All right. Trouble. I'm sorry. I'm on trouble. So
My name is Larry Thomas. I'm a professional genealogy researcher. Been a part of the society for probably close to 16 years. A lot of the resources I've learned because my specialty is Georgia and the Southeast, and there's just so much here to learn. Now, my honorary cousin, Ken.
They're definitely not related.
You said the first time we met.
Ken Thomas, I used to write the Genealogy column in the Atlanta Journal for 47 years till last December when the newspaper severed our relationship. What am I doing? I've been doing genealogy work for a long time. I wrote previously to that. I wrote for a magazine called Georgia Life, which is published in Decatur. And that's when I did Jimmy Carter's genealogy, which led to a lot of repercussions of that. But I also used to work with the National Registry Program in the State Department of Natural Resources. And I worked there working with historic houses and research. So I'm also an expert on how to research your historic house. And anyway, I do genealogy lecturing and I do some articles of their publications when I'm asked for one.
I'm Laura Carter, and I'm a retired genealogy librarian. I was a librarian doing reference cataloging, a little bit of everything. For 40 years at the Athens Library, I spent 1 year at the UGA Science Library and 4 years as a school library media center. So you can tell I'm really up. I got into genealogy by accident. I had poo-pooed it until I went to work at the Athens Regional Library, and this was long before they had a heritage room. And I was assigned to do planned genealogy programming for the public. Well, the reason I got that assignment from my director is because she knew I knew the two ladies in town who were experts. So that's how I got interested in genealogy and got addicted. But anyway, so now I'm on the GGS board currently. I teach all the classes, only at UGA. I teach genealogy for them and try to stay out of trouble.
Understand. My name is Tammy Ozier. I've been a genealogist, I guess, for over 20 years, 25 years. I'm the former president of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, Metro Atlanta chapter. I'm currently part of the national board. My genealogy specialty is African-American genealogy. The states that I research most often is Louisiana, Texas, Tennessee, and Georgia.
Good morning. I'm Tamu Taylor. I'm the current president of the Metro Atlanta chapter of African American Historical and Genealogy Society. That's why we call it ALGS, because it's a long name. I got my start in genealogy as a family history project in fourth grade. I had to start since. My research is Georgia. When I was younger, I thought my world was Stewart County, Georgia, that everybody from my family lived in Stewart County, Georgia. But of course, as you do research, you realize, no, it's not the case. You got other states and places. So that's what keeps me going in genealogy. And so,
Okay, well, thank you. I just want to say before we really get started, thank you to our panelists for agreeing to serve. You truly, it truly means a lot to me that you agreed to do this, to be on the hot seat for a little while. So the way we're going to do it is I have a series of like 4 questions, and I'm going to give everybody on the panel an opportunity to share. And then we will open it up to the audience, and you can pick their brains because there's a lot of genealogical knowledge sitting up here in the front of the room. So some of you have already alluded to this, but share your first interaction with GGS.
my first interaction with GGS was probably in the late 90s when I was doing some heavy research on my grandfather on this listserv called Afrogenians back in the day when it was a a true listener and interacting with different people, and that's how I came across GGS. I didn't become a member of GGS until maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But I used to read all of the publications and to get more information about my research through GGS, and that's how I first interacted with it.
Yeah, I started being familiar with the organization when I learned about odds, which would have been I became a member of odds in 2016, and that's when I actually heard of GPS, and it was just through their affiliation. I probably didn't join though; probably took me another 5 years to join, and I've been a member ever since.
I first learned about GGS from the ladies that were teaching those classes for me back in 1974. But I didn't join probably till mid-80s, 84, 85, 86, somewhere like that.
I've been a member, I guess, the longest because I joined shortly after I got out of the Air Force, so in 1973 probably. Probably because I met some of the same ladies Laura did, who were big wigs in genealogy and all. But I just want to comment on how GGS got formed, because one of the things I did 10 years ago for the 50th anniversary is I interviewed the 3 remaining founding members of GGS. And since then, 2 of them have died. So the youngest member of the founding board, the founding membership of 50 people, is still living. And I call her every 5 years. And she said, well, I'm still alive. She lived at Sebring, Florida. She was so young that the GGS quarterly announced her engagement. So that's how young she was. So she happened to be. But if the GGS got formed out of a class, a genealogy class, and Ms. Hart, who later became the director of the state archives, was doing at Emory, one of the schools around town, and she had a class in 62 or 63, and so that morphed into the GGS that got created in 1964. And a lot of members of that class were the founding 50, trustees, what you call them, 50 original members. And we did write that up in the GGS quarterly, not only 10 years ago, but in our quarterly last year, we did have a special issue covering the founding names and people like that. But I have been a member since 1973 or 74 for sure.
I really can't remember when I first started, but I became more active after 2011. And I'm going to put a different twist on this. So I retired from the U.S. Army. I was enlisted as an officer. When you become a sergeant in the military, you join the NCO club. It's what you do. When you're an officer, you join the officer club. It's what you do. If you keep coming to GGS classes, you join Georgia Genealogical Society and send your money and help us operate. You continue to do these. Is that a good enough plug, President?
It is. Hey. That was a good plug. So consider it. We have membership applications downstairs. You can also join online.
We
So,
got 2 today so far.
got 2. Whoa, see? We're up to a good start. Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. So question for the panel. How has GGS impacted your personal genealogical journey?
Tough one. Because after when I joined, is when I started doing this professionally, but I used to come to the archives all the time doing research. And as a professional researcher, I had very little time to do my own family. So right now I'm trying to get my SAR packet in for the first time. And I've been using a lot of stuff I've learned through this.
I think this, through some of the people I've met through the society, if I didn't already know them, that was important enough to make some connections that I've become lifelong friends with people. But a lot of times we used to have luncheon meetings. Can you imagine having in-person meetings with a lunch at a church or a hotel or something like that? And a lot of times just in that, and I'm a big believer in having meetings because a lot of times the interaction discussion that's next to you sits at the table. Several great discoveries came about. I remember standing in line with one lady who I already knew. And I just mentioned that somebody had sent me a transcript of a family Bible, and I just had to blurt out the name. And she said, "That's my ancestor." And another guy I know, still knows this guy, Steve Johnson, is from West Point, now lives in Columbus. He just blurted out that he was in one of the governors. And I said, well, I researched all the governors. I said, I don't know how you would fit in. And he was kin to Governor Smith, who was the first elected governor after the Civil War, who had no children. I said, well, how do you know you're kin to the governor? He said, well, I descend from his sister, and we have the invitation to the inaugural ball in our scrapbook.
Wow.
So there are a lot of things that just happen because of meetings and chatting, and I'm just a big believer in that. But I know that a lot of my lifelong genealogy friends and connections came from not only the meetings, but the speakers and then going with the GGS team to some of the national meetings. We always had a booth, and that would cause another gathering of people to share your experiences with. I just am a big believer that joining a group, wherever you're involved in smaller societies, with certain counties are important. You never know who you're going to come up with in those situations.
I'll ditto what Ken said. A lot of the impact came from who I met and who I talked to and who I could learn from. And when I became a genealogy librarian later in my career, it was really useful to have that network. So when somebody walked in the door and asked me a question that I was clueless about, I could say, I don't know, but I'll find out, because I would have access to somebody who could help me figure it out. Because a long time ago, I decided there's no such thing as a genealogy expert. And it also is a continual journey, and we have to keep learning. And so GGS, even if you don't have Georgia ancestors, our programming is not geared to Georgia specifically most of the time. It is geared to basic methodology, resources, how you do things. So it is useful for everybody. But if you live in Georgia and you do genealogy, you need to be a member of GGS, because you will get a lot of intangibles as well as tangible benefits.
Yeah, Laura, you kind of took some of the words out of my mouth. I think for me, I was kind of a little afraid, not afraid, but I didn't want to join GGS because my family is not from Georgia. I just live here. And so for a long time, I would participate, come to the webinars and say, oh, I see them, but I didn't want to really be a part of the organization. But after meeting people and starting to go to the webinars and really the methodology, learning how to do genealogy. And genealogy is not, well, it can be state specific, but a lot of it you can apply, wherever you're doing genealogy. And I think that was really the part that really kind of pulled me in and say, hey, I'm here. Why don't I learn how to do genealogy from a Georgia perspective and, meet great people along the way? But it's really that methodology and the camaraderie and the affiliation. I like that there are different genealogy organizations that are affiliated with GGS, and including the one that I'm passionate about, which is odds. But learning that I can be a part of that organization, learn something specific about Georgia, but also apply that information outside of Georgia is why I'm
GGS impacted me, like I said, in the 90s when I was on the listserv and learning about genealogy and the different things that's available to help me with my research. And being from Georgia, I love Georgia, and specifically the county that most of my family came from in Georgia, Stewart County. So even though I didn't find information specifically about my family, learning about the places that my people came from as it branched out, I did more research and figured or found that I actually have family in other counties. And so that those journals, I keep going back to the journals because they were very helpful for me doing my research and understanding where my people came from to help me further my research. So that's how.
Excellent. So the next question is, do you think that GGS has upheld its mission? And I'm going to read a part of our incorporation document, which is the 3 parts that constitute our mission, which is to raise the standards of genealogical research over the state through educational programs, workshops, and the publication of genealogical data, and to constitute a Friends of Archives group for the Georgia Department of Archives and History, assisting said department in building up its genealogical collection, and to promote the collecting and preservation of the early records of the colony and state of Georgia. So that is our official mission as GGS. Do you think that we have upheld that mission?
I believe so. I think GGS and Georgia Archives working hand in hand is very important in providing that information to the citizens of Georgia and those who, believe it or not, citizens would actually do research on their family from Georgia. I think GGS has done a great job of holding that mission.
I agree. I think the one that I see GTS has really focused on is the education. I think that the webinars, having the institute also has greatly increased our knowledge as genealogists, and the camaraderie that GTS has with, of course, Georgia Archives has also been very important. I think it's because of GTS I also support Georgia Archives. So I think they run hand in hand. I think that they continue to uplift the records that are held here, make sure that the members, that we as members, that we know that it's there, we know that that research is available or where we can do research. And I think that GGS definitely has upheld their mission.
I agree. GGS has done a good job on many fronts. Educationally, when we made the commitment as an organization to take on the Institute of Genealogy and Historical Research, when it had to leave Stanford University due to lack of space.
You were the ringleader for that.
Absolutely. I love the way you use ringleader. It was such a major commitment on behalf of GGS to take this on because it's the second oldest institute, Genealogical Institute. The only one older is the one they started at NARA that's now called GenFed. And the Institute and GGS were begun at a time when genealogy, people who were interested in genealogy and were true scholars, were trying to improve the image and the reputation of genealogists from being a hobby where you just tried to prove you were related to somebody famous to where you used real records and did real research. And that has shaped GGS and IGHR and made them compatible. One began in 62, one in 64. So I'm just saying, and for the archives, we were one of the groups that took a stand when they tried to close the archives and actually were sitting in front of the Capitol with signs, fussing to help them not close the Georgia Archives. So I think GGS has adhered to its mission. Can we do better? Yes. Are we working in that direction? I hope so.
Well, one thing we haven't mentioned is the Taylor Foundation, which got created in 1971 in conjunction with GGS, the R.J. Taylor Jr. Foundation, which Mr. Taylor was an industrialist from Macon and Hawkinsville, and he put up $1 million. $1 million in 1971 is a whole lot of money. And that allowed for publication, and it was sparked over the years, and now we've had a few bumps in the road lately. But the point is, it underwrote the publication of Georgia source material. And no other state has such a foundation. So the fact that Mr. Taylor and his sister thought well enough of GGS within the first 10 years of it being founded to create that foundation, and it's still going on 50 years later, that's a huge thing for GGS to have. And when I work in other states in their records, nothing compared to what GGS is being able to help underwrite through the Taylor Foundation. It's forward. So that's another thing that has carried the mission. I think GGS's mission was created long before the internet, webinars, podcasts, and all that stuff. So it's a great vision that they put that together in 1964.
Tamika called me trouble because I am. I'm just a different type of person. We have held to our standards. The question is, where are we going in the future? We need you. We are short several people on our board. People say, I'm not that good of a genealogist. You don't have to be, okay? We need people to run membership. We need people to run our publications. We need some help. And I'm going to put in another shameless plug for volunteers to join our board or join some of our committees. We're looking for, we need an education director. We need people to help put together education. We need people to write articles for our quarterly, because we want it to be quarterly. I keep hearing complaints, well, it's only coming out twice a year. That's all the articles we got. Okay? This last one came out because I wrote a 17-page article, so it covered 2 stories. But we need your help. So I'm going to put in a shameless plug. Please consider joining us. Talk to me. I'm the vice president. Talk to Tamika, the president. Laura's on the board. We're more than happy to talk to you about what you could do to help us.
All right.
Lunch paid?
Do
Do I get lunch paid now?
You might consider taking up a collection. We'll see. All right, so the last question, which has somewhat been talked about a little bit, is share your thoughts on GGS's impact on the genealogical community. So it's sort of kind of something that we've already talked about. So I guess since Larry being trouble, he kind of alluded to the future. So what are some things that, I guess, and I'm off the top of my head, you guys, so I apologize. What are some things that you would like to see GGS do in the future? And then after the answers of these questions, we'll open it up to you guys. So start thinking about some questions you might want to ask.
We do 4 quarterly seminars a year. At least one is outside the Atlanta area. So we're looking for places to go to spread what we do to other societies. If you're part of a society, we have a roundtable that meets twice a year. It's just societies get together with us. I head it up. To talk about what we can do to help your society, because we all want to work to this collectively.
I think continuing our quarterly is an important thing, and we need to consider, as Larry just mentioned, that we are helping be the forerunners for how to do genealogy research, how to document genealogy research, and everybody needs to think about. I heard tail end of Tamika's lecture earlier, but telling your own story, writing up some of the material that you've written about and know about your own family that would help be put in the quarter, would help future researchers understand what you've been through with the sources you've used and bringing a lot of things to light is, I think, another role of GGS to let people know that genealogy is still moving forward and there's lots of things still to be discovered and so forth.
We are the state society for Georgia. And I was on the board 100 years ago. And at that point, we were really trying to focus on becoming more well-known throughout the state with membership more well-balanced instead of being focused on the metro Atlanta area. And that's still something we're working on. There's always more we can do, but we need bodies and people, and you don't have to be an expert genealogist. You just have to be willing to learn the job or do the job. Y'all have all got life experiences that could be beneficial. So GGS, we're looking to the future. We're trying to become more flexible, more dynamic. The world has changed, since COVID, and organizations are all struggling to figure out how to deal with these changes. Every organization I belong to is going through the same thing. So we need your help and your input as to how you want us to change and improve and how you think we ought to do things.
I agree with everything that everyone has said. I think one thing about the roundtable that I think would be good would be to make that available for not just like the leaders of the organizations, but just in general people, like there are other organizations and maybe just have a way of GGS can help spotlight from these organizations across the country, across the state, I think would be good. I think also to continue, obviously, with the, providing the webinars or workshops, et cetera, highlighting those researchers or that are from Georgia or do Georgia research or from the state. Just again, there are a number of genealogists that are not well known, and their work hasn't been highlighted. We can kind of maybe again kind of pick the people to demonstrate or to provide their workshops or whatever. So I just think just the highlighting of the organizations within the state or other genealogists and organizations within the state.
Everyone said very good things, and I agree with everything that they said. I don't really have any, a lot of input, maybe do more about around, this and other parts of Georgia, because everything's in that, right? So maybe, do more road shows or something like that to get you to there. I know what, like, where we go, it's like, oh, we didn't know Ox was there. It's like, I didn't even know we've been here for 5 years. But things like that, I think people, because as genealogists, we know our organizations, we know our societies, but people who are interested in learning more about genealogy, I think doing more to let them understand it's not just about going to Ancestry and looking up a record. Join these organizations and find out more about how you can do research and methodology and things like that to get a deeper understanding. I think that would help.
All right, well, thank you so much for the input. I am making notes. That's why I'm on my phone typing. So thank you so much for that. So I'm going to turn it over to the audience. We have how much time, Robin?
We have about 30 minutes left.
Okay, so we can have a conversation. So who would like to ask a question? All right, I saw the hand all the way in the back.
My question is that I had so much help with death certificate, 90, you don't have access to death certificate. What can we do to get more access to death certificate? Because death certificate tell a lot of times that who the parents are on the parents. And that helps you out a lot.
Okay.
Well, one thing you can do is you're a legislator. It's a legislative issue. One thing y'all may not realize that they've just announced the adoption records in Georgia will be open starting on July the 1st. If anyone's adopted in Georgia and over the age of 18, by some miracle, somebody got a bill before the legislature to allow the adoption records to be open. And we don't know, we weren't pushing that. Nobody in the genealogy community, as far as I know, had any inkling that that was going to happen. We tried years ago to work with Vital Records. We even had a Zoom committee meeting with one of the legislators pushing, but he got the big head and moved up in politics and didn't come back on the line to do anything. But Georgia has some of the most restrictive rules about death records. You sort of have to give them the fact that birth records are going to be closed for X number of years. But death certificates, it varies state by state. And we need to get back online and get somebody involved in it's going to take a legislative positive force. And you don't have to be with a winning party or you're not going to get anything done. But if we can get the adoption thing changed by some unknown input, anything can happen.
So I'm sorry.
But if you know anybody that's adopted has been trying to learn their birth story, they need to get with the adoption website in Georgia. And I did mention earlier, but I've been asked by the state archives here to write a column in their newsletter every time the newsletter comes out, which is every other month. And the one that's coming out in the next few days, I have mentioned this adoption law change and the website that's involved. So if you got anybody, look on that when it gets posted this month.
So just to follow up to that, I'm sorry, Laura. One of the important things about the death certificates is the date. Because the death certificates for Georgia up to 1943 are actually on family search. So if it's any time after that, of course, you have to go to Vital Records. So one follow-up question actually two. One is for Ken, and I'm sorry, I'm taking some liberties here. Is it only the person who was adopted can get the records, or is there family members? Like if a grandparent was adopted, can anybody else get the records?
You'll have to look at the website to see.
Okay,
It said the last time I looked, that they're coming up with the regulations and they'll be in place July the 1st.
so the next question is, Ms. Robin, how can we get on the mailing list for the newsletter?
You can go to our website, georgiaarchives.org, and there is a sign up box on the middle of the homepage. You can pop your email address in there, and that'll get you automatically signed up for that newsletter. And if you don't want to be added to an email list, which I get, you can also, we'll put it under our announcement section on the website. Like Ken said, it comes out once every 2 months.
Did everybody hear her in the back? Okay, so there is a place on the Georgia Archives website that you can register for the newsletter that Ken is referring to, that's going to have the information about the adoption records. And so you can also look on the website because they're going to post a copy of it on the actual Georgia Archives website. So just visit the Georgia Archives website. So Laura, you had a comment?
I wanted to point out that GGS has been an advocate for open records when the original legislation that further restricted records in Georgia, that's what Ken was alluding to when he was talking about, we tried to work with the Office of Vital Records here in Georgia. For 2 years, we tried to get the bill repealed that made those restrictions and just didn't get enough support. But if we're able to muster somebody who's willing to spearhead it again, I hope y'all will help us advocate. Advocacy for open records is really important. And it's part of our education mission, in my opinion. So, it fits our mission.
One of the good things, if anything came out of COVID, I can now go into Cobb County Vital Records and order any death certificate from anywhere in Georgia. $25.
Yeah.
If I'm down in Macon and pull one from Bibb, they're gonna charge me $35 and I gotta prove I'm related. So I just go to Cobb County and order my vital records. Any county, any place in Georgia, but as Tamika said, you have to know the date. Now, if you got a good researcher, they're gonna check a couple days before, a couple days after. If you get some of them, like, I gotta find it, so.
Okay. Next question. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. As you mentioned that you're looking for volunteers, people to be a part of committees and involvement, have you considered the colleges in terms of people being involved? I've been doing genealogy research for over 40 years. I'm a student at Clayton State. They have different programs, and there's independent study, internships, field studies. There is no lack of people that can be involved. And people are much more than I always say people are more than their position. You have non-traditional students there. So you have people there that are my age. When I started, my hair was brown and now it's turning white. So you have people that would love to be involved. Have you considered being involved with Clayton State and being a part of their orientation program so that they can come and know that not only that you exist, but what your needs are? And they may bring a wealth of information, knowledge, skills, heart, and two hands to make your organization much more viable. No doubt it's viable now, but even enhance it or exponentiate your desire.
That's a good recommendation because one of the things that all of us struggle with is getting the young people involved. And so if we can, I don't know if y'all can hear me because I was trying to talk out, but that is a good recommendation and I did make note of that. And we actually have Penny Cliff, who's downstairs if she's not in here, who is connected with Clayton State. So that might be a possibility for the future. Thank you for that. Yes, ma'am.
You said the date, 1943. Is that a rolling date? Is it based on how many years it's been since they died?
It is, and it was a rolling date until they changed the legislation. Because the restrictions for records, they have 75 years, I think it's 72 years for the census. That's why we get them, the next one's coming out April 2032. So the same is true for the death and the birth records. Originally, birth records were restricted for 100 years. the death records were restricted for 75. But when it got close to that 100-year mark, when they were supposed to turn those records over to the archives, the legislation got changed. So now birth records are 125 years and death records are 100 years. So that's what happened. And that's what they're alluding to with the restrictions. Because it really varies from state to state. Because like in Alabama, you can go to the Birmingham, this is true a while ago, you can go to the Birmingham Family Search Library or Center. And on microfilm, they have the death records up to 1960. So it really depends on where you're researching. That's why that location profile is so important. That's why knowing those dates is so important, because you have to know that. So like I said, oh, somebody died in 1942. Guess what? I can go to Family Search and get her death certificate. But if she died in 44, okay. Did anyone else want to add?
Like the law changed in 1919 that made it mandatory across all states, but like Crawford County didn't play for at least 10 years. There are no death records until 1930.
Right.
And as Larry just mentioned, if you do go to the vital record office in the health department, in some outlying county, like I did in Columbus, like he did, but some of them don't ask any questions. You can always say, it's my mother's mother. If you have an unfortunate opportunity to go to the state vital records office, you have some of the most obtuse people in state.
You know, Ken. It's recorded.
But if you do go wherever the state vital records office is, because they keep moving it to make it less convenient for the people that need to go. It used to be on Capitol Hill, but I went up on, off Buford Highway, great location to go,
Yeah.
off Buford Highway. It's not there anymore, but I went in to get a death certificate for a man that my mother had an insurance policy on. He used to work for her. And I had to stand there and say, well, he's dead. And I don't think his widow has been waiting 3 months to get a death certificate. And so forth. I had to stand there and say, you find me the death certificate and I'll wait. And I waited like an hour or two and they had to call somebody and to pretend that nobody created a death certificate for a man that had been dead 3 months. So they just, I don't know what they're doing, but they put up as many roadblocks. You need something historical. You really need to go, and as Larry said, with your ammunition to know the date you're looking at, the name, and then you just say, well, it's my grandmother, my mother's dad or something. And you can say something to confuse them. But different state by state. Then I think what Georgia's doing has any bearing on these other states because you may be pleasantly surprised at what's going on.
I'll throw in one other thing that I learned doing research for a client. And some of you guys know Miss Muriel Jackson. She runs the genealogy library down in Macon. And I learned this from her. So I'm looking for death certificates for siblings. I do research sometimes for law firms, finding heirs of an estate that wasn't properly adjudicated. And a lot of them, the original estate was a formerly enslaved person. So I'm looking for death certificates from people born in the 1890s, African-American. I almost didn't get them because they're like, well, we found the death certificate, but it said they were born in 1904, 1906. I learned from Muriel Jackson that they had to lie about their age to get insurance. I'm like, they're on the census of 1900, so either Daddy's crystal ball was really good.
Question? Yes, ma'am.
Adoption issue. I am looking for a ancestor that was born in 1875. And I think it was done in kind of a rural part. So I'm wondering, I don't think there was ever a formal adoption record. And so I'm wondering what other informal ways would these people have been adopted?
Well, I did a lecture on the Archives website on YouTube about adoption in Georgia using DNA and other sources. You need to look at that.
Okay.
I do cover some of the other states, but the adoption in the states you're dealing with is all that matters.
Yeah.
So what other states did or what doesn't matter, period.
This was Georgia.
Well, the point is, the adoption records in Georgia were not sealed till 1943. Anything that happened before then is in the courthouse. It is anything at all.
Yeah.
And I mentioned a case in there where a lady, it was one of my closing people when I bought a house. Her father had been adopted down near Columbus, and she went to the courthouse and found whatever there was to be found because it was before 1943. So that's what you're going to have to do if there's anything. It's very informal in the old days, and most times somebody that adopted somebody that were usually kin to them and pick their sister's child, their grandchild, or something like that, and just throw it into their family. And they didn't really adopt total strangers in the past. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Okay. Any other adoption questions? Because I'm thinking of it. Well, it's a brand new world for the adopted folks, and we need to all be, if we're approached by somebody that's adopted, you got to realize that sometimes they watch too many TV shows and they're expecting some happy reunion. And that may not happen and probably won't happen. And I've got a lot of current active adopted cousins in and out of my family, and they're all, several of them have both their birth parents living, and neither one of the birth parents will have anything to do with them. It's extremely sad. It's not their fault they were born this way.
I helped adoptees from their biological parents through DNA, and I've done about 16 cases, and I've had 3 that didn't turn out very well. The rest of them have, but there's 3 that did not.
Well, that's good. You've got a good track record with some of them. It all depends if the birth parents are still living. That's where the rub comes. And so, does somebody else have
And a question, Ms. Kathy?
Not related to adoption.
Okay, it's okay. We can keep
Okay,
moving
so
on.
back to the why or the benefits of becoming a new member of the society. Somebody alluded to when they were doing their introduction that it's all about how to do the research, the people and the places and things that you learn about, not just for Georgia research. And that's why I was just trying to get other information about benefits of becoming a member.
Why don't you just try us out for you? Try us out and see what you can, but you may not be your cup of tea. It's like any society.
Okay.
Because I wrote a genealogy, I was made an honorary member of a lot of groups. And when you look at what people are doing, there's all so much educational stuff like the Cobb Society, which Larry's been involved with a long time. The Cobb Genealogical Society has great stuff every month. And that may be what y'all, no offense to GGS, but you may need to join more than one. But I belong to several local county groups like in North Carolina, and they have some great programming. Not only meeting the people that are related to you that might connect up and put queries in there quarterly or whatever they do. We're big on joining, so that's why we're going to push it.
Oh, we need that sign up. You can go down.
We may flag you for the next.
Thank you.
She has one right there. Yes.
I'm curious what you guys have found about cemetery records. I know in Georgia, they seem to be very haphazard in a lot of the rural counties, and what's available in the archives or what you guys have found, because cemetery records seem to be very, very difficult to get.
What do you consider a record? The office of a cemetery that has an office is only going to be in a city.
Right.
Or a public, privately owned cemetery like a perpetual care, but rural cemeteries, churches didn't really, church might have the church records may list who's buried.
Right.
Whether they got a tombstone or not, but there are no per se records.
Right. They don't pull those into the state in any way, shape, or form. So everything.
Now, in some states, like in North Carolina, they went out and did during the WPA days of the 1930s, they went out and recorded cemeteries. So sometimes a tombstone may be missing, but in North Carolina, they might have recorded it in this database that's now online. And in Atlanta, we had Franklin Garrett, who later was director of the Atlanta History Center, Atlanta Historical Society. And Mr. Garrett went out and he had a 35-mile radius of recording graves that he saw. And a lot of those cemeteries are long gone. And luckily he recorded when he was a young man. And he was born in 1906, so he got busy at this in the 20s and 30s. And his records are online, and certainly the Atlanta History is here on some format. But when I started genealogy, there were a lot of people that were just going to spend their lives looking for a tombstone. And I gave up on that early on because I looked for a cemetery one time down near Columbus, Georgia, where I'm from, and it was near a friend of mine's farm. And my high school friends would go out there and we kept looking for this graveyard. And it turned out to have 30 or 40 people buried in it, but it was sort of camouflage. And we looked and looked for that because I knew my relatives were going to be there. And finally, we found this old man, one-legged, had lost a leg in some cotton flicks, and he showed us where it was. And after all that effort, there were nice tombstones, but none of my ancestors were there. And after all this trouble, my ancestors had plenty of money. They left the huge estates. They had no tombstone. So not everybody expected a tombstone. And a lot of times there was no stone around to be got for a tombstone. So we have in our minds, we think everybody in every culture wanted a tombstone, and they did not. And some of the wealthiest families in Georgia, the founder of Emory University's father, in fact, when he talks about his father's graveyard in the family Bible that's now at Emory, he just says, my father's buried next to the magnolia tree on the left, my mother's buried next to the tree on the right. And even though this was 30 or 40 years after they died, and that man had gazillion dollars when he died, there's no tombstone. Even then, the son didn't even go to the trouble to put a tombstone down for his own parents. So it's all part of the culture that we didn't. So it's good if you find them.
Right.
But I wouldn't devote my career to looking for some tombstones.
Well, the only reason I ask that question is I've been participating in rural Georgia. We live up in North Georgia with Find a Grave. So on some weekends, I'll go out and get some photographs or whatever for other people. But they're right. Like you said, there's not a lot of tombstones there. But in my own research, we had a grandfather that I wasn't sure the relationship to this other man. That, you know, there's always a family story. And when I found his tombstone, him and his brother are buried together, and on the tombstone, it says, my beloved brother. So, you know,
You're very lucky.
yeah, tombstones have dates on them. So if you have a name with no date,
Many of the families I've ever worked on, I've never seen one say this is my brother.
I know, lucky, right?
So,
Every county in Georgia's had a book done on tombstones.
yeah,
Okay.
And they're here at the Georgia Archive. We have the best collection of books on county, some of the different private groups have done. And that's where you ought to see first what somebody's already reported, because they could have done it 20 and 30 years ago.
there's also vertical files. The archives has church and cemetery records downstairs.
Okay.
So it's in the microfilm room past the surname file. So there may be a list there, but it's organized by county. So that's another resource.
You know, one thing to keep in mind with the tombstones is it a modern tombstone and an old grave? So there's one, Reverend Warren Keyes, married to Nancy Polly Beasley. But the grave marker was put there 100 years after they died. That's not proof. So I'm still trying to prove he married a Beasley. So.
You also need to be aware that there are typos. I don't know what other word to use on tombstone. My great grandmother's tombstone has her name totally wrong, and I asked my father why he and his mother, she raised them, by the way, couldn't spell her name right. Because it's just wrong. And the dates are often wrong. And Ken mentioned the WPA surveys that were done in North Carolina. Other states, sometimes those WPA surveys were done in particular counties. So go back and look if one was done, because when we did the Clark County Cemetery book, we found that the DAR had also done a survey of certain cemeteries in the 40s. Well, a lot of those stones were no longer in existence when we did our more recent survey. So there's no one place that's going to solve the problem.
So there are WPA surveys for churches and other resources downstairs in the archives. So another plug for the archives.
And also some churches, like my family church, you had to be a member to be buried in the cemetery. I found that out when my mother died. She wasn't a member of our family church. And so I was like, my mother in the church, and I'm like, no. I'm like, well, she's your relative. So I didn't bury my mother there. Like, that's something I learned, that some churches require you to be a member, be buried in their churches as well.
And they don't necessarily keep records.
And they,
You know, even a church that's very active now and has an active cemetery.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I guess I have two questions. So with the church cemetery situation, if the Georgia Archives doesn't have it because it's a rural church, it's an African-American church, can we add stuff? Is there a process to give you guys information?
Yeah, and that's.
in the church.
Mhm.
Okay. And then I guess the other question about outreach, you guys do podcasts? Or like with your website, make like a AI chatbot or anything? Just because, like, the only way I found out about this is because I actually came to the Georgia Archive just to start doing some stuff. But like, otherwise I wouldn't have known about it. Like, you get with like county commissioners, put it on the website. Hey, this is what's happening here. You probably have, I don't know.
She sounds like a volunteer for publicity.
So word out, because I wouldn't have known about it unless I actually came here.
Subscribe to the newsletter.
Most people won't do like newsletters, they want to email, so
Well,
that's why
that's why-
like
Yeah, well, Facebook, Georgia Genealogy has a Facebook page, and if you just follow it, you see stuff that pops up. What?
You have Instagram?
And see, that's the thing.
Do we have
Because
Instagram?
I don't think we do, but that's the thing, because a lot of groups, genealogy groups, they are staffed, if you will, by older people. So you saying podcasts and chat bots and all that, yeah, chat bots and all that, that's something that goes over many of our heads, because it's like, yeah, what is that? So that's the thing, that's the whole connecting to the younger generations, because like you just said, there's some generations who don't care about emails. There's some of us who live by emails. Some of us on Facebook, some of us are not. So it's a challenge, because even though we want to get the word out, we may be using technology or communication tools that is not being utilized by the people who really need to see the information. So like he said, I know we keep talking about volunteers. All organizations are going through this process where they need more blood, new blood, people with those skills. Because even though I'm probably one of among the youngest in the group, I don't really do podcasts. I don't do chat, AI chat box. AI really is one of those things where I haven't adapted it yet because I have my concerns about it, but that's just me. But that is a good point for why we need more people with those different types of skill sets to come and help make us more visible, because we are relevant, because the information we're sharing is always relevant. But the visibility of it is a challenge, just like you mentioned.
And the room is full. So Robin filed the reservations for this room registration. So the point is, we got the word out. Room only seats 100 people. The room is full. Can't get everybody involved, but I'm glad that you found out about it. But it's a mixed bag. I put it on my Facebook page, but I bet you if everybody looks at my Facebook page, doesn't come to anything that I'm involved in. They just say they like it, And I should have said, you do the best you can. And maybe, but last night I answered somebody to the Columbus, Georgia stuff. There's all this, we like Columbus, or history of Columbus. And I wrote in there, somebody wanted to go someplace to buy vintage stuff. And I said, well, what about my postcard book, Columbus, Georgia Vintage Postcards? And she bought the book. So you never know what kind of comments you make steers the person interest. But
Exactly. So now it's on you to spread the news about PBS and Hodge and all the others, because it takes one person to spread it.
Public libraries or like.
Well, there's only so much we can do.
Yeah.
And like when we ask people to pass the word out, the group here is from Albany, Georgia, where I spoke in April. Raise your hand from Albany, way in the back.
Woo, wait.
Well, they're trying to
All
revive,
right.
in Albany, they're trying to revive the Southwest Georgia Genealogical Society,
Oh,
which has
okay.
a great track record,
Yeah.
great publications
Yeah.
in the past, but they've
Mhm.
had some low months, low years. But when I was interviewed by the reporter for the Albany paper, and I got a great article about my upcoming speech, but that young girl, and she told me, when I asked her about her name, she said, well, my father's from Scotland or something. So she had no deep roots, but she thought because I was going to speak to the Southwest Georgia group, that I was going to speak about Southwest people, Southwest Georgia people. So in her mind, she couldn't conceive of the fact that it was a genealogy talk about everything, And so we're having a hard time communicating, but I have people that write me and they want to text. I said, no. If it's a serious conversation, it's going to be on email. Email only. I said, you can text me something, but I'll say, nope, it's going to be, I have a lawyer friend, he wants to dictate these texts because he's a lawyer, he knows how to dictate. And I said, no. If it's serious, I have to transfer it to email to reply and to save it. So we're all, and Larry's got clients. So you've got to negotiate with a client. How are you going to communicate? And you have to be strict to those old folks like me. They just, I'm dealing with a lady right now that's, wants to talk about how to prove who her father is. I said, well, you send me the check first. And then we'll discuss it, but we're gonna discuss it on email. And of course, she didn't even send the email yet. She has, well, when the check gets here, we'll talk about how we're going to, but I'm not going to communicate with anybody on checks other than say, look at the email. That's what I tell them.
All right, we got time for one more question. Yes, ma'am.
I just had two quick questions about methodology. I guess the first one, do you all like connect with international societies? And then the second one, I guess is for you all, anybody in the room. Has anyone used like ArcGIS as a resource? And if so, like the mapping software, and if so, like, is it helpful? Is it not? I'm just curious about those two things.
Can you
Heard the
repeat
question repeated.
I couldn't hear.
So the first question was, do we interact with international groups?
Yeah.
And the second question was, have we worked with ArcGIS,
In a mapping software.
the mapping software? So as an organization, I'm going to say we haven't really connected internationally, but we did have the Ulster Foundation here in March, and they're out of Scotland.
Yes.
If I remember correctly. So we do have some. Northern Ireland, thank you. See, I get them confused. So I'm thinking about the book. Anyway.
Don't say that there.
So, tread lightly. But yeah, we have some interaction with some groups, but not a whole lot because it really depends. But we really try to focus on Georgia. But we do have methodology that can be applied to other research for other locations. And so we, to my knowledge, have not done GIS.
No, to my knowledge, we have not done anything with ArcGIS technology, but some of the colleges and universities may be doing that. The University of Georgia is doing all kinds of interesting things. The other thing, though, about international is family search. If you're doing international research, use the Family Search Wiki. And you can access Family Search for free. If you don't have an account, get one. But the wiki can lead you, because it'll list organizations, it'll give you an overview of what records are available for what. It's one of the best starting places. If you're trying to do international, to me, that is, and then just Google for the, Carpatho-Russian Genealogical Society or whatever, because the National Archives of any country is also, and they may not be called National Archives, but keep those things in mind.
Sharing fun for all. If you're doing Caribbean research, we have what we call special interest group. One is for the Caribbean. We partner with our New York chapter. The Atlanta chapter does. So look at other societies and see what they're doing as far as international research. Also for ArcGIS, I haven't used it personally, but I do use like Google Maps, and I put like where my people are from and map it that way. So ArcGIS may be a good, but I know you have to have a license or something for ArcGIS, but those kind of things are helpful when you're doing research.
And so we do have someone in the audience, Mr. Cole Hale from Cobb County, who has a project that has been working with ArcGIS. So if you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit about that project? I'm bringing you the mic.
Like,
Oh. Now we know.
Gotcha. Okay, we're talking about two different things.
Okay, sorry.
So what I was initially talking about was, or thought she was talking about was, I've seen Tableau used to sort of build, it's sort of like what we call it My Google Maps, where you can, My Maps on Google, which is what I believe you were talking about, where you can sort of put your own markers in and trace where your family came from, and you can turn it into a timeline and everything with that. But I am currently working on a project with Kennesaw State University and our GIS we've got our own team in Cobb Libraries, where there was a historically Black neighborhood in Cobb County called Jonesville. It was destroyed to build the Bell Bomber plant, which has now become Lockheed. And we are using mostly city directories, but also census records to find out the names of people that were there, using obituaries to find out their names and find out biographical information about them. And I really don't know really what ArcGIS is, but I'm giving it to our team, everything we can find about the people that were living there. And it's just sort of like a catch-all where it's a map of the community. And I think as you scroll over the different homes, you'll get that biographical information, you'll get that context, and it is literally just any media you can think of is going to be about the people that were there.
Okay. So I was just made aware that I missed one hand that's been up for a while. So she will be the very last question, because I don't want to stop y'all from getting your grub on. So what's your question?
I don't have a question. I was just gonna answer your question about ArcGIS. I have used it in the past, but it's been a while. It's a resource that you can use to find some of their information on the T.dot website. You can also use it in conjunction with historical aerial type photography. It's a website. There's a cost to it, but you can get a free part of it. Aerial photography goes back really is like 1955. What I use it for is looking at my interest in churches and areas that I'm researching, trying to figure out where these churches are for customer burned down and seriously. And looking at those, looking at the size of cemeteries, those type of things. You can also use those things in conjunction with tax records that the tax assessor's office, they go back and they also give you like forms, things of that nature. So it's kind of bouncing. You can also find ArcGIS resources at the state SHPO's office, so state historical preservation office. They used to be open to researchers to come in. I'm not sure now. You would have to get in contact with them. I think they're under the Department of DCA Department of Community something or other. Department of Community Affairs for state of Georgia. They used to be up under the Department of Natural Resources. But check with them. They got that because the researchers that come in from Cofield research farms in the area, they upload that information to an ArcGIS file. That's it.
Well, thank you very much.
I heard you mention aerial photographs and I couldn't hear all of it. GA has Georgia aerial photographs through McGill and they're free. So there are plenty of places that will sell you access to aerial photographs, and they may have others. I think they've got others, but I know they've got all of Georgia, all the aerial photographs of Georgia at the UGA library site under McGill, which is their Map and Government Information and Library section. Huh?
I think here at the archives, they have like some of the railroad files. They had to, when they were doing railroads and doing highway stuff, I always come through, they have to map all this stuff and document all this stuff, working stuff, that type of thing. So check some of it over.
Okay.
Just one last plug. When you think state agencies, historical records, think state archives.
Yeah.
So there are some GDOT records here. There's a huge map collection here. So definitely consider that. With all of that being said, thank you so very much. Hopefully you learned something new, like myself.